Good morning, UP scientists. Today we're going to be writing our scientific explanation of why certain substances dissolve and why others don't. So remember, the whole reason we're doing this is that as food scientists, we've been investigating solubility so that we can recommend how to make a salad dressing that stays mixed together. So now that we've learned a little bit more about what happens to molecules of solids and liquids when they're mixed, we can use what we've learned to think about the salad dressing. So just as a reminder, here's our email from our good friend Lauren Harold, the president of Good Food Production Inc., to our food science lab. And the subject here is update on salad dressing. She says, "Dear food scientists, I know you've been researching and investigating how to make our ideal salad dressing. I would like to ask our team to start gathering the right ingredients. Have you found any substances that will not leave sediments in the dressing? Please tell me which ingredients we should use and explain how you know they will not separate from the oil and vinegar in the dressing. Thank you for the update. Sincerely, Lauren Harold, President, Good Food Production Incorporated." So what she's asking us to do here is she wants to know which ingredients will dissolve in the dressing and how we know that. So what are those 4 ingredients that we tested? Which ones were soluble in water and which ones were not? Okay, so remember that so we tested the citric acid, the sugar, the pepper, and the cumin. And remember that the citric acid and sugar were soluble, the pepper and the cumin were not. So remember that as scientists, we write explanations all the time to help other people understand how something works or why something happens. So we're going to be writing explanations to help the president of Good Food Production Incorporated understand our recommendation for the ingredients to use in the salad dressing. So remember, when we are writing a scientific explanation, we want to follow all 5 of these guidelines. We want to be answering a question about how or why something happens. We want to be describing things that are not easy to observe. So when we're explaining why the sugar or the citric acid dissolved, we're not just going to say it dissolved, it disappeared. Those are easy things to observe. We want to explain in detail, like the why of how it happened. It's going to be based on ideas we have learned from either investigations or texts, or ideally both. We're going to be using our scientific language, those vocabulary words we've been writing down, and it's written for an audience. So our audience here is the president of Good Food Production Incorporated. So we can make sure that our explanation is easy for our audience to understand by including those important science ideas that we've learned and explaining exactly what's happening with those molecules. So our explanation today is going to answer this question: which flavor ingredients will not leave sediments in the salad dressing and why? So when we're writing our explanation, we want to make sure we're including a topic sentence that answers the question. And then we want to include supporting sentences that tell what happens and why it happens. So first thing we want to do is have you write a topic sentence. Now, this topic sentence, along with a couple other questions later in the video, are going to be put together at the very end to make your complete explanation. So make sure you do a good job with these and put effort into them. So that way you, at the end, when you're putting everything together, you have a very simple job to do, just copying and pasting, and you don't have to go back and rethink all your work. So the topic sentence, if we want, we can start with this sentence starter in the example, or you can come up with your own. So the starter we have here is: sugar and citric acid will not leave sediment in the salad dressing because, and then you finish that sentence, or you can create your own and type that up in the box right here. So now that we have our response, we need to support our explanation with some kind of evidence. So remember that we looked at a few different things during this unit. We had all our different models of dissolving and not dissolving. So think back to what we learned about dissolving from the Solving Dissolving book and from our sim. And based on the thinking you did, what evidence do we have about dissolving and how did we gather that evidence? So a couple pieces of evidence you should have remembered. We had our observations of the sugar, cumin, pepper, and citric acid that were mixed with water in our flavor ingredients test. And those showed that some solids dissolve in water and some don't. So that was a direct observation we did. And then we also had the results of mixing our substances together in our modeling matter simulation and those drawings from the book Solving Dissolving, which showed that some molecules are attracted to water molecules and some are not. So using that evidence, we want to go ahead and write the rest of our explanation. Feel free to go back and look back at the previous page for a couple ideas on those of evidence to include. Make sure you include some of those ideas from the supporting evidence chart in your explanation. So this part should be probably at least 2 sentences long. So your whole explanation is going to be at least 4 sentences long, right? So go ahead and write those supporting that explanation. And remember, when you're writing the explanation, you want to make sure it's doing all these things that a good scientific explanation does. Want to describe things that aren't easy to observe. Want to base it on ideas we learned from the text. We want to use scientific language and make sure that somebody like our audience, the president of Good Food Production Incorporated, who's not necessarily a scientist, can understand it. So go ahead and write that middle part of your explanation, including your supporting evidence now. And once you're done with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to writing a concluding sentence for our explanation. So what do you think you could write as a concluding sentence for your explanation? Okay, so one example that I came up with is, to wrap everything up, this is why you can observe that citric acid and sugar dissolve in vinegar. Okay, so because remember, we did use water in our experiment, but that was so that the vinegar wouldn't mask the taste, and water and vinegar behave very similar to each other. So since we're writing about salad dressing and the base of that is usually oil and vinegar, we're gonna make sure we are explaining it in a way that the president of Good Food Production is gonna understand. So now you just wanna go ahead and write your concluding sentence for your explanation. You can either use the example or you can create your own. And then once you have all those parts done, what you're going to do is go to the assignment on Google Classroom, go to your Google Doc, and you're going to copy paste each of those 3 different parts that you made together into one explanation, so that we can take a look at it, comment on it, edit it, go over it. So the way you're going to do that is, if you look at your Edpuzzle video along the bottom here, you can access questions that you've already answered by clicking on the little arrows or these little kind of teardrops. So if you go back to the first question where you made your introduction sentence, you can find the answer here, highlight it, hit Control-C to copy it, go over to your Google Doc, and press Control-V to paste it in. And then once you have the introduction, go back to the evidence question, copy paste that in after, and finally go to the conclusion question, copy paste that in at the very end. So please go ahead and do that now. And then once you've done that, we are done with today's lesson, and we will be taking a look at some of those explanations we came up with next week. So have a good day, and I'll see everybody on Tuesday.